looked at last week was we looked at chapter 7, and we looked at that first interlude in between the sixth and seventh seal. Oh, does anybody need a sheet? Because I've got them tonight. Okay. All right. So we looked at that first interlude between the sixth seal and the seventh seal. And, you know, in that interlude, we saw a little bit about God's protection of his servants, either on this earth or in heaven, before the judgments start to happen. And so that's basically what chapter 7 is about. Before we start to go into uncharted territory, anybody have any questions up until this point? No? Okay. All right. Well, if you remember, what we looked at was in these seals 1 through 6, that these had to do with kind of a chain of events that were going to be going on earth. And that is, we've got a progression of what Antichrist and his taking over is going to be. We see that there's persecution that happens, what happens in the fifth seal with the martyrs, and then we see the sixth seal, which is going to be God's judgment. And then we have that interlude, and then we have the seventh seal. Now, the seventh seal is really an expansion of all this, because what we're going to see is with the seventh seal is we've got the unlocking, if you will, of the seven trumpets, and then the seven trumpets are going to have a corresponding. Boy, that's a neat little color up there, isn't it? So we are back at it. So seal number 7 is the 7 trumpets and then the 7 bowls, okay? And what we've discussed before is that we've got these interludes and preludes that kind of go along through it, okay? So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the 7th seal, and then we're going to talk about the first little prelude, because there are these preludes that happen before the seals, before the trumpets, and before the bowls. And then we're going to start to take a look at these trumpets right here. Okay? So, chapter 8 and verse number 1. So, in chapter 8 and verse number 1, it says, when he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Okay? So, that is the opening of the 7th seal right there. And so, you remember he's got this, the Lamb has the scroll with 6 seals in it, and every time a seal is broke, then there is another bit of revelation that comes forward, and John sees it and he writes it. And so, you know, we've got the writers, we've got the martyrs and everybody in heaven, we've got the judgment on the earth, then we've got that interlude that takes place, and then all of a sudden the 7th one is broken, the last one, and then silence. Okay. Now, heaven has been a very noisy place up until this point, remember? Okay, we've got, when we're looking at the throne room of God, we have the 4 living beasts that are around it, and the 4 living beasts are continually praising God. We've got the 24 elders that are encircling it. 24 elders are praising God. We've got thousands upon 10,000s of angels that are encompassing the throne of God, and they are too praising God. We've got the multitude before God there in the white robes, which we saw in the that little interlude, and they are praising God. So if you think about it, that's a really noisy place, isn't it? Okay? And so all of a sudden the Lamb breaks that seal, and when he breaks the seal, silence. And you know, you wonder why. I think it's kind of obvious why. It's just that, you know, there is kind of a getting ready for the magnitude of what is about to happen. You know, the seriousness of it, the solemnity of it is just such that, you know, everything is just quiet. But I guess they say that there's a lot can be said when nothing is said at all, and in this case, there is a lot being said here in the time period of a half hour about what's about to happen. What's about to happen is going to be really serious and violent, for lack of a better word. And so here's this half hour of silence before all these things get going. Okay? And so now from there in verse number 2 through verse number 6, now we have this first interlude. Now this interlude, or second prelude, what this is going to do is just like with the opening of the 7 seals, that just sets the stage of what's going on, right? And so we had a glimpse into God's throne room and the Lamb, which set the stage for opening up these seals. Well, this is going to do the same thing. It's going to set the stage for these trumpets. And so you notice in verse number 2, it says, "And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets." And by the way, I don't know what these 7 angels are, who these 7 angels are. It says these 7 angels that stand before before God, but I don't know that they've been mentioned up until this point. We've got the angels of the 7 churches that were prior to this, and so maybe that's the same. But what we discussed earlier was that the angels of the 7 churches, maybe they're the pastors of the 7 churches, and these really are angels. Okay, and so that kind of threw me for a loop, and it still kind of throws me for a loop, where it says, "Then I saw these 7 angels who stand before God," and I'm thinking, well, what 7 angels that stand before God? Well, I don't know, but they're the myriads upon myriads of angels that were encompassing God's throne. There were 7 of them that were standing before it, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Now, the trumpets that were given to them, we're not talking about Miles Davis or Louis Armstrong. We're talking about a ram's horn, a shofar trumpet. And so, in biblical days, a trumpet would not have been a brass instrument. A trumpet would have been this ram's horn that was kind of hollowed out so that you could blow through it and it would echo. And they would have been used for calling people's attention to something. It would have been a call to do something, a call to enact something, a call for worship, a call for prayer, a call for business, a call for, whatever it is. It can also be used for a warning signal in terms of an enemy is attacking. And so sound the alert, sound the trumpet. It could be used in terms of going out for battle. We sound the trumpet, and that's the signal to go and attack. And so that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about a trumpet, is we're talking about, something that is going to alert us or warn us about something. And so it says that they're given these 7 trumpets, and then another angel. So we've got the 7, right? And the 7 were given the trumpets, and then we've got another angel. It says, who had a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. The prayers of the incense, together with the prayers of the saints, went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Does everybody know what a censer is? Right. So in the Old Testament, you had 2 altars. You had the altar, the main altar, where the sacrifices were burnt, and then you had the golden altar inside the holy place. And this golden altar would have the priest would have taken a censer, and he would have put coals inside of it. And then he would have carried it from the main altar into the other altar, and there he would have burned incense on this altar. It was the altar of incense. And in the Old Testament, what this symbolically was used for is that it was supposed to be, you know, it was right there by the Holy of Holies and the mercy seat of God. And so the smoke from the incense would have gone up, and it would have symbolized the prayers of God's people. Now, according to Hebrews, everything that was in the Old Testament tabernacle was really patterned after heaven. And so what we see in the Old Testament with the tabernacle is really a pattern of what is up there in heaven. And so, you know, we talk about the altar, and then we talk about the altar of incense, but really that is the copy of what is really there. And so now we're talking about what is really there. And so this angel is going to come up, and this censer is going to be, you know, something that would have been, you know, probably on a chain, would have been, you know, a brass or gold or silver or something, you know, container that you could put the coals in, and we would have carried it. And you notice it says he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And so here you've got, you know, kind of going back to what we've been looking at with the fifth seal, and with that interlude, we've got the souls that are there praising God, and we've got the prayers of the saints, those that are on the earth. It's coming up before God. And this, in terms of much incense, you know, God always listens to prayer, but he's going to be especially attentive to what's going on at this point in time. And so he goes and he offers it up, went up before God on the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunders, rumblings, and flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Then the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to sound them. And so all of this is in preparation of saying, okay, here are these angels, and this is what they're about to do. Okay? So, verse number 7. Anybody got any questions or comments on that?
So much of this is Old Testament.
Well, it is.
Back to
It is.
just exactly, except for the angels. No angels in the New Testament. He used angels all during the Old Testament.
Well, we see angels in the New Testament too. You see angels during the ministry of Christ. Gabriel. You see angels when you see Gabriel when he announced the birth. Yeah. You see angels attending to Jesus after the 40 days of fasting during the ministry of Christ. In the book of Acts, you remember when Peter was imprisoned, the angel came and released him from prison. You know, so we have angels in the New Testament too. Yes, ma'am.
So when you said, it says here, I saw 7 angels, and then the next verse it says another angel.
Yes.
That means there's 8, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just make sure I understood that.
Yep, that is correct. Okay, so verse number 7, it says the first.
And then there's 5 angels in chapter 7. So are they not related at all?
They're cousins.
They're cousins. When you say 5 angels, okay, you're talking about the 4.
4 and then another.
Yeah, and then another.
2. So I was just curious about that's 5 there, and then here's 8 over here, like, but they're not the same, I guess.
I don't think so, because it just, you know, where it says, and I saw these 7 angels who stood before God. Well, right. I mean, there's thousands, 10,000 to 10,000s upon, you know, going. So,
okay.
Yeah, just you got the 7 that were before the throne of God, whoever they were, because we don't know, and then you got another one. Okay, so you know, maybe one in chapter 7 got called to do a double shift. I don't know. Okay. So, verse number 7, it says, the first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down upon the earth. a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea was turned into blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star blazing like a torch fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. Do you see any similarities between these trumpets?
All the third.
Yeah.
Third.
Yeah.
Every single one of them has a third, right? You know. So what is this third? I don't know. Is it a third of everything on earth? It does sound that way. You know, there's going to be some people who maybe think that it's just symbolic of a large percentage of earth. I just kind of wonder if it isn't a third of the totality of earth, because that's just the way it sounds. So what are these? Anybody got any ideas? All of
Like what
these we're
kind of
talking about.
catastrophe, like a natural, like a,
The angels and
an
the
eclipse,
what they're doing.
well, like.
Well,
on Earth,
trumpets
how
1
would
through
we-
4.
right.
What? Okay, here we are. John is describing something, right? He's describing these things of what happens when these trumpets sound. And when the trumpets sound, there is some sort of disaster that is going to occur on the earth. What exactly is this? I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know.
I mean, it could be like, like a volcano eruption, or who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that what my mind goes to is that if you notice that in all 4 of these different things, number one, we've got a third, but something else that we've got is they are all geological or astronomical in nature, okay? With the first, we've got a hailfire and blood thrown on the earth, and so the earth, third was burned up with the earth. A third of it was burned up. Third of the trees and all the green grass.
Like volcano.
Well, I wonder if it isn't something like that.
See?
As far as blood goes, we could be talking about something that is the color of blood rather than the actual substance of blood. Yeah, red. Okay. And so red would mix with hail, talking about brimstones and then fire. Okay. And so that makes sense to me. Now, is that what's going to happen? Well, I think, we're just going to have to wait until it gets here to find out for sure. But it could be that, maybe, there is going to be all of a sudden, with the blowing of the first trumpet, just all of a sudden a tremendous amount of volcanic activity that's taking place. And that is what really, in the second angel sounding his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown into the sea. And so,
Earthquake.
Could it be possibly a nuclear attack?
well, there's going to be some people who think that, but I tend to shy away from that because I see that these are God's judgments that are happening
Oh, okay.
of what God is doing.
Well, it didn't mention.
And yeah, God can use some things, but it just seems to me that God is doing this. And if you think about it, remember, John is not seeing the actual event itself. What he's seeing is a visual representation of what's going to happen. And so, all of a sudden this huge mountain is thrown into the sea. It's like underground volcanoes. I remember when I was a little kid reading a story about some sailors that, all of a sudden, noticed something bubbling up under the sea. And then, like the next day, they woke up and there was something that was coming up. And then, the next day it was, it was a pretty sudden thing that was coming up.
Maybe two plates, like Earth have these plates, maybe plates.
Well, it's all going to be connected,
Yeah.
But he does say something like a huge mountain, so it almost sounds like he wasn't quite sure what it was, but it was like a mountain. I mean, why would he say something like
right?
if he was sure of what he was seeing?
For sure.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it was on fire, so it might have been hard to see.
Well, that's true. But the idea of that it was thrown into a sea, and the third of the sea turned to blood. I read one author talking about volcanic activity could raise the sea temperatures, and then the red tide that we've got in the Gulf of Mexico, that this could be, covering quite an extent, because, it's not just one volcano, it's an extensive amount of volcanoes that are going on. And with that, covering the seas, that you've got a third of the sea creatures dying. And that same author talked about how at one point, 1/3 of ships are at sea, at any given time. And so while this is just all of a sudden going on, that's what you would have the 1/3 of the ships being destroyed. Olga?
Like in Old Testament, like 10 plugs.
The
Was
plagues?
one, turn water to blood. Maybe
Yes.
God just can do without what we can see, understand, but it's his judgments.
Right. And so
He might turn water to blood.
it could be that this reference of blood is really just talking about, something that is unclean and impure and deadly.
Maybe.
And so, it could be, some sort of reddish substance that's going to be deadly. Again, it's a good question. I don't know if we can really be dogmatic on any specific answer.
Because if he wanted us to know that, he would have said it differently.
Right. And we're thinking about things right now, but again, if Jesus doesn't come back for 1,000 years, it could be that people at that time are thinking about something entirely different. I don't know.
And last thing, like when he punished Sodom and Gomorrah, he put rain with fire and sulfur.
Yeah.
Sulfur, which is how it was when Abram, he saw fire with sulfur. So wow. To me, what's described is a volcanic activity that's going on. And where people suspect Sodom and Gomorrah are, there's a lot of, I think, tar that's there, maybe from some sort of volcanic activity. I don't want to say like in a volcanic eruption, because there's different kinds of volcanic activity that can take place. But I think when Abraham looked out, he saw smoke rising as from a furnace over that whole valley. Yeah, it was burning up. And now they come, archaeologists can find sulfur.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
So it's proof Bible is right.
I think so.
And Hollywood takes all of this and makes movies out of it.
Yes.
Well,
and they also take
They do though.
liberty.
When you read all of this, no. I don't mean movies about the Bible. I mean Hollywood uses these thoughts and patterns to make fiction movies.
Yeah.
They're
It's
not taking God's material.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it,
And
if
that's what makes the Bible harder for a non-believer
well,
to
that's my
go
point.
with, because they're like, yeah, I see that in movies all the time. That's
Right.
just
It's just fiction.
written. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's,
Satan uses that, yeah.
I think Satan does.
I
Do
made
that.
a rainbow. They took God's rainbow and did, I'm sorry,
Yes,
symbol for wrong lifestyle.
right.
See?
I know.
Seriously, take something else. Why are you taking God's creation and rainbow?
Mm-hmm. And it really is a shame because, you know, the rainbow is a symbol of God's promise that he's not going to destroy the earth
Right.
by
And
water
we were-
anymore.
Mhm.
And you know, you take that beautiful symbol of God's promise and you turn it into a perversion.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Well, I think that a lot of this too, I can see people, non-believers, Hollywood, whatever, saying this is climate change. You know, so when I hear about this, it's something that I can see them all saying, "What's climate change?" You know.
Oh, okay. This is something that I've thought about. Okay. Providing, of course, a couple of different things happen. Number one is the climate change momentum. You know, radical environmentalists keep on going to its, you know, degree, and the nth degree of it has to do with end time events. Because if you think about it, some of the I'm talking about the radical progressive environmentalists are in league with the radical progressive, you know, leftists that are taking over not only our country, but Western civilization. And a lot of the things that are in it really do go hand in hand with the Antichrist in terms of dictatorship. Okay? So if that were to occur, then can't you see that God's judgments are hitting what they are praising? Because the environmental movement, you know, maybe not so now, but if it continues, I can see it becoming somewhat of a religion. It's almost like that right now.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
they kind
and
of
it's not
worship
that the people in the end time would be worshiping the creation
instead.
necessarily, but they're going to be worshiping the Antichrist. But at the same time, what we read in the book of Revelation is constantly about how they did not repent of their idols.
Yeah.
And one thing about an idol is that it's a worship of the creation rather than the creator.
That's right.
So, yes, sir.
Well, it said, it reminds me of the plagues of Egypt.
Yes.
Where God targeted the gods of Egypt.
Yes. And so that's what I'm getting at is, you know, here we've got a targeting of the creation, and again, I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm just saying, I'm speculating that if this were to occur and if it were to somehow have some kind of interlacing in with the end time events, I can see it with this, you know, and so that's why I'm saying, you know, Paul, you're talking about, you know, nuclear bombs and everything like that. And I think that God has everything that he needs to destroy the earth without using mankind.
Yeah.
And just like the first creation was created with a trigger mechanism of destroying the earth by water, the earth that now exists has a trigger mechanism of destroying by fire. So.
Whatever that is.
Whatever, but I mean, what we're reading here is it, right? I mean, all the way up till, well, I guess we've only talked about two of them so far, but two of them so far have hot fire in it. Okay, so the third one does have fire, but it's coming from the sky. Third angel sounded the trumpet, and a great star blazing like a torch fell on the sky, and a third of the rivers and the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. Okay, so what's wormwood? Okay, wormwood is a plant. I don't know what the plant's, you know, real name is as far as, you know, the scientific name and everything like that, but wormwood is a real plant. And it is poisonous, and it has a bitter taste to it. And so whatever this star that's going to fall from heaven, it is going to be like a blazing torch, and it is going, whatever it's going to do to the earth, it is going to fall on a third of the rivers and the springs of water, and it's going to turn them bitter, meaning it's going to turn them poisonous, and many people are going to die. Okay, so a third
of the water supply is going to be affected, but not a third of humanity, just many people. Okay? And that's the reason why it's going to be called wormwood, is because of the plant and the effect of the plant. And now, what is this? I've heard some people talk about it's a comet, it's a meteor. It's not going to obviously be a star, because a star is going to be, millions times bigger than the planet. But anything that's going to be falling from the sky, anything that's going to be coming into the atmosphere is going to look like that burning torch, right? And whatever's going to be coming into our atmosphere, it's going to have some sort of impact on the water supply. And so, if that is coming into the atmosphere and then blowing up and then spreading whatever is, its material is in the clouds, and then, that is what's going to be hitting the, the rivers and the streams and the springs and so on and so forth. Before the second trumpet, that's going to be hitting the sea. This is going to be hitting the fresh waters. So, a little bit of a change. Okay? All right. Fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark, a third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. What in the world? Okay. What about this? Now, I understand there's curvature on the earth, okay? But as far as the eye can see, it's flat, right? We don't look out and see a curvature of the earth, we see flat, all right? Thank goodness. So,
Can't do it, motion sick all the time.
so what happens if up in the atmosphere we have a layer of something, okay? A layer of smoke, a layer of soot, debris, dust, okay?
Who's that yawning?
Yeah, who yawned?
I'll load it. It was me.
Expand this out just a little bit. Okay? So, from a point of view, if you look straight up, you only have this much to see through, right? But if you look over, you've got a lot more, right? Okay? And so if you think about, the sun and the rays of the sun coming in, a lot more are going to be filtered at an angle than if it were directly overhead. And so that would explain a third being darkened. And the same with the moon. Okay? All right. Any ideas? Thoughts?
Could they be just like thunderclouds or something?
Well, that may be, but if you think about it, if you've got volcano and volcano, what's that?
Is that what you said?
Oh, she is saying it could be thunderclouds.
Oh, well, that's why I was wondering why you're drawing volcanoes.
I mean, in, I think it was the 1800s. I can't remember when, but when was Frankenstein written? Anybody know? Frankenstein was written during I forgot what they called it, but it was a very cold summer, and it turned into a very bad winter. And just globally, that summer, crops failed. They had all kinds of different problems because it was just so cold and so wet and so rainy. And the reason why that happened, I think, was because of Krakatoa, a volcano. Volcanic eruption happened, spewed all kinds of ash and dust up into the sky, and it blocked out the sun, and it disrupted, weather patterns for over a year.
Well, wasn't it last year that they were worrying about, was it from all the fires out west, and it moved across the country, and
Yep.
maybe not to that severity, but it was enough to warn, have people a little alarmed about what was coming our way.
Well, if you looked, when that was going on, I mean, you could look at when the sun was setting, and it was the same effect right here, of the sun was being filtered out by layers of smoke. Not so much when it was overhead, though. So if you take that, and if you think about it, you go back to the first trumpet, where you've got a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees and the green grass was burned up. And by the way, why all the green grass and why not the trees? Well, because grass is going to burn up really quickly. It takes more to burn a tree, and so if fire is moving quickly, it can scorch the grass, and then the trees, even though it's going to damage the trees, it's going to move past them. But if the trees really catch on fire, you've got a big fire, then you've got more to deal with.
When you're thinking about this, and you're saying a third, so do you think it's like in one continent, or one
I don't
part
know.
of the world?
That's what I'm talking about. See, what are we talking about when we say a third? Are we talking about a third of all the trees?
Yeah.
Are we talking about all of the green grass, or are we talking about a third of a portion of the earth, and of that, a third of the trees and all the green grass in it?
A portion of it, because over here in chapter 9, they were told not to harm the grass of the earth,
Well, grass can grow back,
or any plant or tree.
right?
So,
But Connie, grass can grow back, and so if grass is scorched off, if you give it a year, it's going to come back.
But it says all was burned up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
we do the verbs all the time.
We'll have to, like I said, we'll have to wait and see.
About the trees and the earth, but then the grass is all.
Right.
Maybe it's from that water that went into all the waterways. It killed all the grass.
Well, now that's going to happen later. So if these are successive,
Okay.
so you got the first, you got the second, the third is going to be wormwood. And really, it's not that the water is going to harm other things, it's going to harm people and animals that drink it. Okay? Okay. All right. Verse number 13, it says, "As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, 'Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blasts that are about to be sounded by the other three angels.'" And so if you think this is bad,
Whoa.
all right. We're going to go ahead and stop there, just simply because it's 8 o'clock, and I don't want to get into the fifth angel, the fifth trumpet, because it may take us a while, and the sixth. And I'm tired, and you're tired.
Apparently I am.
Shannon's tired. Okay. But before we, leave things off, you got any questions or thoughts on it? Again, I'm not saying I've got answers.
Is there already a star? You know how they go through astrology and they name everything? Is there already a star that we know that is named?
I don't know. But see, that's what I'm saying, is that it can't be a star, because the star is not going to impact the earth and the earth survive, because a star is going to be, billions of times bigger than the earth. So
it's basically a sun from another.
So it's got to be like a meteor, it's got to be a comet, it's got to be something like that. I mean, if you think about it, you're looking up in the night sky,
and you see a falling star, we call it a falling star, but it's not a falling star.
This is how he interpreted it in the vision.
Well, I mean, it's just what it's called, you know. I mean, we say the same thing, you know. Hey, did you see that falling star? Well, it wasn't a falling star. It was a meteor entering the atmosphere, but that's just what we say. Because when you're looking up at the night sky and you see it, that's what it looked like. Okay? All right. And I think that it's going to be called that because of the effect of what it does on the earth. You know, but so yeah, maybe there is a star out there named Wormwood, but if there is a star named Wormwood, I guarantee you that's not what's gonna hit the earth. So I'm not gonna say guarantee because God can do anything, but I don't think that's it. Okay.
The book Frankenstein was first published in 1880.
1818.
Wow.
Okay. Somebody can look that up, you know, about, I forgot what it was called, but it was like the Bleak Winter or something like that. The summer of it would, if it was published in 1818, it might have been written before that, but I remember that, you know, she was writing it, or the reason why she got the thought to write it is because it was just so dark and bleak and cold outside.
It's called The Year Without a Summer.
Yeah.
The Year Without a Summer.
There we go.
The year 1816 is now the year without the summer.
Yeah.
The average temperatures were around,
Oh, Europe was the coldest
yeah.
on record with
And
major food shortages.
Yeah, because of volcanic weather.
Mount Tambora?
oh, okay.
Tambora. It started erupting in 1815. Oh, or it occurred on April 10th of 1815.
Okay. And then it was that next year.
It caused a volcanic winter.
Yeah, that was near Valley.
I've never even heard that.
I haven't either.
Volcanic
Yeah.
winter that dropped temperatures.
And what was the average temperature that summer?
It says 0.4 to 0.7 Celsius worldwide.
That's almost freezing.
Right?
Yeah, 0 is freezing.
0 point, it's almost freezing. Oh, it's so freezing.
It said because of high levels of tephra in the atmosphere, caused a haze to hang on the sky for a few years. And then it had red hues in the sunsets.
Yeah, it's Switzerland had severe famine that year, and they were desperate.
Okay.
That'd be fun and interesting to read about.
Well, I picked it up somewhere. So, all right. So, leaving off of that, just kind of giving you a glimpse of what's going on in the future. Lord willing, we're going to have Bible study next week on the 8th, and then the next Tuesday after that, the 15th, I'm going to take a little vacation, so we're not going to have Bible study on that Tuesday. And so, you know, Lord willing, we're going to take a look at chapter 9 and the 5th and the 6th trumpet. If we get through those, then we'll kind of look at some other things as well. But that's going to be next week, and then, you know, hopefully we get through there. That'll be a good stopping point for the 15th. Okay? And continuing on, looking at later, this is in July. On July the 6th, we are not going to have Bible study because that is going to be the week of church camp.
And I will not be able to send a text reminder.
No text reminder.
I might could send one Monday briefly at lunch, but I will probably forget.
Yeah. So here is your reminder right now, July the 6th.
You can do the jump in the same group and just send it.
And June the 15th. Yep. So we'll have Bible study. We won't have Bible study. We will have Bible study. We will have Bible study. We won't have Bible study.
Yes, no, yes, yes.
Lord willing. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming out tonight. And how about if we be dismissed?